Hi guys, my name is Michelle Corbett. I work as a recruiter for global marketing over at L'Oreal. And so for me, good things to do to stand out in an interview. Well, I'm going to start with the smaller things. So for me, I was always taught before I started being on the other side of interviews that you should show up to an interview about 15 minutes early. I have to tell you, as an interviewer, I hate it when I get a call from the front desk saying my interview is here 15 minutes early. So I think it's still a great idea. Don't be running late, but don't check in until like a couple minutes before the interview, just because sometimes our days are so back to back that even those little things can make such a difference. And then just yesterday, I was doing mock interviews over at NYU, and one girl that came in never took off her coat. And that's actually happened to me a couple of times. And so what I said to her is, I know you spent a lot of time on your outfit, and I want to see it. So, take a minute once you get there, settle in, get water if they offer it to you and you want some, and just make sure that you're in a relaxed state, because then you're going to be in much better shape for when they're asking you questions and stuff if you're just feeling more at ease.
I actually think I'm Emily Hollander. I handle talent acquisition for Rag & Bone. And to your point, I would say definitely don't be late, but just don't be too early when you're in back-to-backs. It also puts pressure. I feel pressure like, oh my God, this person's been here for 15 minutes, but their interview's not until 1 o'clock. So I think it really makes sense to be conscious of time with everything that you're doing. So even in the interviews, making sure that you're getting right to the point, you're answering the questions without adding too much fluff around it, so you can continue on in the conversation.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Marissa Kazak. I work at SLR in talent acquisition. I agree with everything everybody just said up here. A lot of it, at least in my situation, has to do with conference room space too. You're generally waiting for another meeting to end before you can bring somebody in. Space constraints in New York are awful, generally in most companies. What else? Sorry, the question was?
So just pet peeves, and then also what you can do to stand out in an interview.
To stand out in an interview. I would definitely be prepared, especially if it's a company that you're dying to work for. Show that you've done some research ahead of time. Talk about something that just happened on Twitter or social media or something big in the news. Make sure you're aware of that. You may get asked, or you'll kind of stand out if you bring it up to an interviewer as well. I can't really stand it when people come in and they're like, I don't know, I just want to work here. Well, so does everybody else. So give me a reason why you want to work here. You know somebody, you heard a great thing, you saw something on social media. Show me that you have some interest as opposed to just getting a job.
Great insight. And also I'd love to hear, can you give an example of an interview that really had an effect on you, and whether or not you ended up hiring that person, just something that stuck with you?
I can start with that one, sorry. Sure. So a couple years ago I worked at MTV, and I did a lot of the entry-level hiring there. There was a situation where we had a huge internship program, and two guys were interviewing for the same role in the same department, which they were both the interns at. Two similar backgrounds, same situation, they interviewed in the same place, two completely different interviewing stories. One showed up really kind of low-key, MTV was jeans and t-shirt, kind of didn't really put an effort into it, just like, hey, I'm here, you know what I do, kind of been interning for you, like this is kind of, didn't really take it too seriously. He's like, okay, got some feedback. Manager was like, okay, he was okay. Guy number two comes in, dressed in a suit, fully prepared, like totally on top of some big project that was going on in that department. Totally, in a heartbeat, won that position over 10 times. And the manager specifically said to me, like, guy number two, awesome, well prepared, wore a suit, was actively engaged in the interview and totally stuck out. So you can't take something like that for granted because you're interning in that particular department, because generally on the size of the company, there's a lot of interns that want that same role.
So I actually had an experience a couple years ago. Before I was at Rag & Bone, I was doing executive recruitment. One of my clients was Burberry. We were working on a big merchandising position. And at the time, because I was consulting, we would, I was in London, we would do these meetings, but they could go till 10, 11 o'clock at night, depending on candidate schedules, if they were at the office till 9 or 10. So it's 11 o'clock, I probably met 13 people that day. And I was like, I just want to go to my hotel room and go to bed. And this guy shows up, he comes, it's 11 o'clock at night, he comes in, again, like dressed to the nines, And when we were asking him, like, what do you see as opportunities for the brand? A lot of people will say, like, I mean, it's amazing. What could you be doing better? He came up with these 3 very distinct things. Okay, these are the opportunities that you have in Asia. This is what you could be doing with the actual assortment. So when people ask you, what do you see, what do you think could be better, or what opportunities exist within a brand, you should be complimentary and cognizant of the brand that you're speaking about, but coming with actual solutions that you could then be a part of executing, I think is also super important. He actually didn't end up taking the job, but it stuck out with me.
I'm going to give you guys an example of an intern interview that really stuck out to me, because I'm guessing with where you're at in your careers, intern interviews are what you're doing. So I feel like a lot of people feel like to stand out, they need to have done something amazing in their internship. But in an internship, you don't always have that opportunity to do that. For me, it's more about having a history of being a great intern, meaning taking a project and executing it to the next level. So actually, if any of you have heard me speak before, I probably use this example. At this conference a year ago, I met a student who came then to interview with me, and she said that she was interning at a magazine, and one of the tasks she was given was to organize the stripes closet, which seems like a very normal intern task. How can you really take that to the next level? But her example was, she was really thinking about, if I'm an editor, how am I going to be pulling looks? And I mean pulling looks by season, and seasonality normally would have to do with sleeve length, so she started organizing the stripe closet by sleeve length. And that's such a simple example, but for me it really stuck out because it showed me that she wasn't just saying, what's the fastest that I can organize this freaking stripe closet? How is it going to be used after I leave? How can I really make an impact? And how can I think through, what my manager is going to need, which is to be able to pull looks at the right season, with the right stripes. So it's those little things. So don't be afraid to use those little examples from your internships, even if they're not the most relevant, because we were talking about like a marketing job. Just showing that you have that history can really, really stand out.
That's great. And of course, professional experience isn't the only way to stand out. Can you talk about what kinds of extracurriculars you value, or maybe what a college student can be doing now to develop the qualities that you look for in a candidate?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of extracurriculars, I think it's going to go back to my similar point where just make sure that everything you're doing, you're putting your whole heart into. I would rather you have one great example of this club that you joined, or a class project where you really took the lead or whatever it might be, versus padding your resume by joining a million clubs that you are not even involved in. You get their emails once a month or whatever it might be. So again, just be picky about what you're doing. Your time in school is limited, and then you're going to go into the corporate world and you're not going to have those vacations or long weekends or whatever it might be. So, just make sure that you're really committed. That way I can see your passion when you're talking to me about the activities you're doing, and it's going to make you want to get more involved with them. So, you're just going to put that much more of yourself into it.
I actually look at volunteer experience. I think it's super important to show that you actually have compassion towards others. I think that in a lot of ways, fashion can get a bad rap about people and sort of what they care about and what they don't care about. So I think that it actually goes a long way to show that you care about something else or someone else outside of your tunnel vision to get this job. I also think it shows that you'll be a good team player and that you care about other people you're going to be working with. Ultimately, you're going to be part of teams.
Excuse me.
Ultimately, you're going to be part of teams, and to show that you care about other people means that you probably will be caring about your team members as well.
I totally agree with the two ladies up here as well too. I look for people that have held leadership positions in any volunteer organization that they've been part of, or any club or organization they've been doing during school. I can take a look at resumes where people went to fantastic schools, but not to knock, but if you're a lifeguard for all 4 summers and do nothing else, I don't really care what school you went to, because you're not going to bring something to the table. If somebody went to maybe a lesser degree school, but they did all this leadership work, they did volunteer work, they're going to stand out more and they're going to have more to talk about. Even if you can try to get an internship or a part-time job throughout the summers and combine that with waitressing or lifeguarding, because everybody needs to make money, but try to give something a little bit more deeper to bring to the table when you come and interview for an internship.
What are some cliches to avoid when we're trying to put our best foot forward?
don't tell me that you have a passion for fashion. It's really, really trite. Explain why you're super interested in a brand or a company or an industry, but be articulate about it and don't sum it up with a cliche. I think that was a don't, but I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely. Again, if you're coming into an interview and saying like, this is my dream job, I just can't imagine not working here. Again, to the points that were made earlier, let there be a reason for it. Tell me the story about like how you realized you fell in love with beauty or this, or marketing or whatever it might be. And that for me is a really important thing, is telling your story. And same thing, when you first come into an interview and they say, tell me about yourself, it's the difference between going through every bullet point of your resume or, having like a nice elevator speech that tells me a little bit about why you're here today, why you applied to this particular job, and why you think your background in and outside of a corporate, internship experience or whatever it might be would make you a good fit.
I don't know, those are good points. That's a hard one, a cliche. I don't really know what else to add to that.
That's all right. Well, they're cliches for a reason. And then at the end of an interview, it's fairly common to hear, so do you have any questions for me? Is there anything else you'd like to ask me? What kinds of questions do you appreciate? And maybe which ones aren't so helpful in elevating that candidate for you?
I would kind of, obviously, depending on what type of company you are interviewing for, there's a lot of information on the website. So I wouldn't ask about the stuff that's blatantly on the website that's readily available for you. Ask about something about career progression, how long does it take normally, or what the steps are to get to the next level in the role. Ask about, the interviewer, what their experience has been like, how long have they been there, why do they stay there, what do they like best about the company. To kind of learn more about the environment, stuff you're not going to get from kind of a question about your background and about the role, the bigger picture questions, the culture there, events maybe that the company is into that you maybe have something to add about in terms of charity events or that sort of thing. More about cultural, I guess, and I'm losing my train of thought here. Cultural and just like outside of the normal standard typical interview questions.
Yeah, I think to your point, if you can find it on the website, don't ask me about it. But I would say that if you're obviously interested in your own personal growth, but I think you should also be interested in the growth of the company. So ask about where there's areas of opportunity for the brand. Are they going to be expanding internationally? Are they going to be opening up new stores? Are there new product extensions that are happening? Those are the sort of things that you probably can't find online, and it's a good way to find out, okay, how can I actually fit into this as the company continues to grow?
I think a couple of points here. One is, think about who you're interviewing with and make sure that your questions are tailored for them. So oftentimes I'll get, I'm a recruiter. I've not worked in marketing. I don't work in the marketing role that I'm interviewing you for. So asking a lot of questions about the brand and their strategy to me, I can answer them to the best of my ability, but that's a great question to ask the hiring managers. Also, I think it's important to, definitely come in with some questions written down. I know that I was always taught to do that. But also, I think going back to our first point in terms of time, you might have 30 questions. We definitely don't have time for you to ask 30 questions. So what I normally say is, come in with the 2 most important questions and make sure you get those answered. And it's perfectly fine to go through them and say, oh, you know what, I had a lot of questions, but you answered a lot of them for me. And don't be afraid to have some questions that come up from the conversation. I think that's the trap that a lot of people fall into, is they've prepared their questions and they're so nervous and so excited about this interview that they almost don't remember what was said for the past 45 minutes. So it's really nice, and you feel like you are really engaged in a conversation when the questions do sprout naturally from the conversation that was just had, as opposed to, those standard canned questions. But I think it's fine to have those, just in case you need something to kind of ground you in the interview. And my favorite question when I was interviewing was always, what does success look like in your mind? Like, what do you want to be able to say about me in 1 year? And that was my not so canned question that I asked everyone. So it's okay to have some of those, but just don't be afraid to make up some that come naturally from the conversation.
Great. And so, of course, we all know fashion is a very image-driven industry. Has anybody worn anything to an interview or presented them in a themselves in a way that really stood out to you or made them think they were a good fit for your company?
I think it's going to depend if they're interviewing with me or interviewing with the brand. For me, I think, I don't think you need, if you're interviewing for like one of our companies, you most likely don't need to wear a formal suit, right? Think a little bit about the brand that you're going to interview with, the company you're going to interview with, and feel free to show your creativity in a professional way, but through your outfit. So it's very easy to buy, a nice dress suit off the rack. It's more difficult to come up with like, okay, Redken is a fashion-forward brand, so let me get a cool black dress with a nice like chunky statement necklace or something like that. That definitely goes a long way. For me, it's fine. You can, I'm more flexible, but for the brand, it really does make a difference. They definitely, and I've been told by hiring managers, oh, make sure they dress all in black because it's Redken. And that's like an HR kind of no-no, but if you're doing that on your own, if you're taking that initiative, again, it sort of shows that you're not just wearing the same thing to any interview, you're thinking more specifically about why you're meeting with me, why you're meeting with my hiring manager, and it just shows, I think gives you that little edge up at the end of the day.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Totally going off of that statement, Estee Lauder, MAC is one of their brands, and MAC, their requirement is that everybody comes in black. And so they would prefer not a suit, which I thought was very awkward at first too. So I was like telling my candidates, I'm like, MAC prefers black attire. I mean, because they basically have said to me, we don't want to see people in suits because it's not creative enough. So anything but a suit, as long as it's head to toe black, is what they want to see. Which is completely goes against like every HR rule ever to tell candidates. So it's a very interesting conversation, and people ask me, they're like, wait, really, like a black shirt, a black suit? I'm like, well, not really a suit. Maybe something like a suit, but not really a suit. So I try not to give examples, but like it really, like the managers will decline somebody because they didn't come head to toe in black. So if you have questions about an interview and if you're not really sure, I would ask whoever it is that's setting you up with the interview, the recruiting coordinator, the HR recruiter, whoever it is, and just ask them, be like, is there a recommendation for what is appropriate to wear? Because in the fashion industry, it is interesting. It's not the normal typical suit and heels and that sort of thing. I would dress for the brand, again, like the brands you were mentioning, like MAC or Redken, and whoever fashion forward, show your personality, put it in your makeup, put it in your jewelry, but not a standard suit.
I also just want to add from my own experience, if you're ever volunteering somewhere, or if you're like backstage at Fashion Week and no one tells you what to wear, just wear black.
Just wear black.
Just always wear black. It never goes wrong, and it's very versatile in terms of like the experience and how formal things are.
I would say definitely wear what makes you comfortable. Speaking from Rag & Bone, I mean, our best-selling product is ripped jeans. So take that with a grain of salt. Don't come in a suit, but I also think that if you're going to be thinking about what you're wearing versus the conversation at hand, it can also be very distracting. Also, if you are already a fan of the brand, if it's an apparel brand, you're already a fan of the brand, you have some of their products, wear them. I mean, it's always exciting to see someone who's excited about the brand and is actually wearing it. I remember when I was meeting, my final interview was meeting with our founder and creative director, and I was walking out of his office and he was like, nice shoes. And it was just like, it just kind of like left an impression. So I think that if you can afford the brand that you're interviewing for, wear it.
And that's a great point that Marissa made earlier. We're all in talent acquisition. We're recruiters. It's in our best interest to set you guys up for as much success as possible. If you have questions, ask us, and to the extent that we're able to answer, we want to help you. For us, it's really not helpful for our hiring managers to call us and say, well, she was great, but her outfit was not that, So, like I said, we want to set you up for as much success. So ask the questions if you're not sure. I've definitely had this conversation with a lot of men who are coming to interview. It's like, I'm a guy. How do I not wear a suit if I'm interviewing with like the president or the general manager? But if they're in jeans and you're in a very, very formal suit, 3-piece tie, whatever it might be, you're going to feel awkward in that interview as well. So, it's definitely a fine line, but these days I feel like you can express yourself so much through outfits that are still professional, or like cool tights like you're wearing or something like that. So
we've talked in some of the other panels about informational interviews. What's the best way to ask for one, and what are your thoughts on that, on asking for someone's time? Like, what's the best way to do that?
I think it depends if you're asking for an informational interview with a recruiter or with someone who's in the department you want to work in. I think regardless, if you do get a response, just know that you're on their time and they're doing you a favor. So come in with a point of view. If you just want to know about the company, that's not really enough. You can say something like, I'm really interested in marketing. Tell me about how your career progressed in marketing, how you got your foot in the door. Where's marketing going within the company? Where do you see yourself going in marketing, let's say? Mm-hmm. So the more that you can tailor the conversation to what you're looking to get out of it, the more thoughtful the conversation will be and the more specific answers you'll get out of it as well.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. Actually, I just wrote a blog post for the Fine Spark blog about how to network with strangers on LinkedIn and requesting those informational interviews or those connections. And the main takeaway is make sure it's in the right context. Make sure that if you're reaching out to, any one of us, it's for a reason. Now you guys have a reason saying, I saw you speak at this Fine Spark event. I wanted to pick your brain a little bit more. And adding that context makes me feel more inclined to say like, oh, I have a relationship. This person reached out to me and not to another recruiter at L'Oreal for a specific reason. So whenever possible, just make sure you're explaining to them why you picked them, why you want to pick their brains. And then in the informational interview, an important thing to do is to make sure you're getting the information you want, but also that you're sharing information about yourself. So that if someone tells me, oh, I need a great intern in HR, I say, oh my God, I just met someone the other day. Because now I know about Sally and what she's been doing at LVMH, and now I'm more inclined to talk about her. If you spend the whole informational interview talking about me, well, I feel amazing, but I know nothing about you or whether I would recommend you for a job.
I totally agree with all those points, and also I think another good way is to really tap your college or university alumni that are working at the company that you're interested in. They definitely have a common ground from there. They're more apt to respond to your LinkedIn emails. You have a common thing to talk about to begin with, and if this person happened to be at a Fine Spark event or a conference or another event that you went to, which is kind of a double reason why they should probably answer you back. I know I'm a huge supporter of trying to help out alumni. I went to Villanova. There's like 100,000 of us plus in this area. So when people reach out to me, I make the time because I wanted that help when I was back in college, and the people that helped me along the way were invaluable for their advice and connections I've made throughout the city.
Great. And I mean, this is a group of people who knows that it's important to put yourself out there. Like, these people aren't here because they think that you're going to get a job just sitting in your room. But what are some good ways to keep in touch with the people that you've networked with? And what's a good way to reach out?
I think the main thing, that we've sort of said a lot is context, right? Making sure that you're reaching out for a reason. So sometimes it's a little bit of a manufactured reason, but reason enough to reach out to someone. So to say, oh, I saw this great article about your company, or, this thing that we talked about in our interview really reminded me of you because I saw it the other day, whatever it might be. Have a reason, even if it's, we spoke 3 months ago and you said to reach out closer to my graduation, and now I'm 2 weeks away from graduation, would love to reconnect. Again, putting that context and telling me why, as opposed to I'm going to email you every week, even if you say I have no new news, is a much different email to get, and I'm much less inclined to respond to you every single week saying, okay, great, you're still 3 months away from graduation, you're still 3.5 or 2.5 months away from graduation. So again, just make sure you're doing it with purpose, and remind me, we met it here, you told me to do this, I'm doing it, let's talk.
Does anybody else have something to add to that?
I think you
Covered
everything.
Yeah.
Do that. Don't do
And
that.
just remember that everybody has caller ID, so we're gonna know if you stalk us, and it happens more times than not. And it's just like, really, like, everybody has caller ID. I'm gonna remember your phone number. I am not gonna pick up when you call me every week or multiple times in a week. Like, it's just not cool.
And this is another small detail, but of course it's good to send a thank you after an interview. Like, do you want that thank you right after the interview? Do you want it the next day? Like, do you like a personal note? Like, how do you go about that?
I think notes are rare to me personally. I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry. Let me clarify that. Handwritten notes are very rare. So I think if you want to stand out, send a very professional, very grammatically correct, spell-checked paper note. If you want to stand out, that's fine. I think a quick, email, but very short, concise, to the point. Again, but if you send it 100 times, check that email before it goes out. Send it to somebody else, because that could make or break a response from an interviewer. Especially if that interviewer then forwards that email to the manager. The manager's like, oh, this word was spelled wrong, and then now you're no longer considered a candidate. So.
And on that note too, like a lot of times people will forward me an email that somebody else forwarded them, and they won't change anything about the email, and so it's like, oh hey, so and so like had such a great time at the bar, like we like, and it's super casual, and then the resume, and that email gets forwarded straight to me with the resume. So just something to keep in mind, like if you're passing something along to a friend, that also might be a good circumstance to check it too, even if it is somebody you know well.
The other thing I would add is I think it's probably more important to send a follow-up email to your hiring manager versus necessarily to us as recruiters. I remember so I used to work in a very small company where we didn't interview that often. So when I was interviewing, then it stuck out to me much more when someone did or didn't send a follow-up email, and I had partners in that company say, I will not hire someone if they don't send a follow-up email. Now being in a recruitment function where I meet a lot of people very regularly, to be honest, I can't even remember who has sent an email, who hasn't. So for me, it doesn't make a difference one way or the other. I agree that the handwritten note is something, like who doesn't love to come back to their desk and get mail that's not like a credit card bill or something like that. So those are always nice, and if it is your dream job and you want to go the extra mile, why not? It won't hurt you. But I think probably for the hiring managers who maybe this is the only job they get to hire and they feel really important, they'll love getting that email or that handwritten note, and it will make much more of an impact on them.